Red Ray Gun Limited presents
The Benji and Nick Show. Well, hello.
Hello. Good day.
Good evening.
Good afternoon.
Good night.
Goodbye.
That's the end.
Goodness.
Loch Ness.
You win.
It's like a fun game of Snap, isn't it?
I can never work out what's going to happen. Welcome to the Benji and Nick Show. I'm not Benji.
And I'm not Nick, but we're both sitting in chairs, so that's something we have in common.
It's important.
This week, of course, we are talking to you from our usual setup of being across the country from one another. But here, whereas last week we were sat on chairs next to each other, so it's a bit different.
That was weird, and it all got a bit spooky, but there's been more mention of that later. Our main topic this week is the BBC post-apocalyptic series Survivors from, was it 1976? 75?
I think it's 76, let me double check. Of course, if you are not familiar with our normal formula, we talk about cult television.
Oh yeah,
and old telly from days gone by, and we give a verdict on it, a recommendation, or we sit through it and perhaps come to a different conclusion. Survivors was 1975, by the way.
I remember the news about it came out after Genesis of the Daleks, a Doctor Who story by Terry Nation. Of course, it was created by Terry Nation, the creator of the Daleks. And, he had quite a hit rate, really, didn't he? He created the Daleks, he created Survivors, and he created Blake 7. He did pretty darn well, and just wrote for every big successful adventure TV series in the 60s and 70s, certainly late 60s. 70s. Anyway, and we'll be talking about that later. We'll also be reading out some of your emails, which you kindly send in to podcast@nicholasbriggs.com. Always good for a laugh. And we'll also be talking. And there's a competition result finally, which I should have given last week, but we're too busy frightening the wits out of each other watching Ghost Watch with a rabid owl. So competition results later. First of all, though, what have you been watching this week, Benji?
Oh well, as you'll already know, I've been watching Night of the Beast.
Oh yes,
yes, which
Night of the Demon.
Night of the Demon. Sorry, I don't know. Never mind. Night of the Demon. Sorry, which was on Talking Pictures TV, which I set to record. I originally recorded it as a sort of Halloween thing, but I forgot all about it. And then it was only sort of yesterday evening where I wanted something to do, so I sat and watched it and absolutely loved it. What a fantastic film. So effective in the way it's executed. It just nails atmosphere so well. It really does. And all the characters are sort of slightly creepy in their own right. Apart from the dreadfully racially outdated Scotsman playing an Indian chap.
Is he Scottish?
Yeah, and I think he is, because either that or his Indian accent wasn't very good, because I kept thinking there's a bit where he said something like they have that in India, and I was just expecting the other character to go, "Oh, have you been?" Because you're obviously not from there. But apart from that, it was really good, and there's some fantastically spooky bits and bobs. It's all about kind of devil worship and magic and things like that. But it's amazing. All I'm going to say is this: they get a lot of mileage out of a piece of paper flapping and floating around, because it really, really gave me the heebie-jeebies. So massive recommendation for that one.
It's a great movie, isn't it? Great. I was going on about it a few weeks back, I seem to remember. Anything else you've been watching?
I watched on the way up to, I think I might have discussed it. I think I discussed it last week. It was Rio Bravo that I was watching.
Yes, you hadn't finished it though.
With the guy, I'm not finished here. The guy talks like that, who guards the sails in the back.
You did indeed mention that. The reason I recall these things more than you is because I edit these podcasts, so I hear them as you say these things and walk away.
I walk away, never to venture down that again. I did watch it's only a short clip, but it was certainly quite interesting. It was uploaded it to the BBC Archive Twitter, and it was from a programme called the ABCs of Music, I think it was, and this one was E is for Electronic. And it has Roger Lim sitting talking about electronic music, and that was really interesting because it was actually a very kind of broken down way of describing every element of electronic music and what they do. But that's just on the internet, you can find it. But it's really good if you're interested in sort of radiophonic sounds and things like Doctor Who and the works behind things like Blake Seven and all those weird noises. It's really good little insight to that.
Oh, do send me a link to that.
I certainly will. Yeah, it's worth a go, I'd say.
Okay, well, this week, of course, I've been carrying on watching Public Eye.
I caught the end of it last night when I turned the telly on.
I'm several days back. What was happening?
I can't remember. It was literally the credits. That's what I didn't.
Well done.
Just things
with
going
him just
up and
walking
down.
along by the river and the railings in his yeah. Great. So the funny thing is, when the programme went to colour, which is now in on Talking Pictures, they kept the same title sequence as from the black and white days. So the opening title sequence, they just tint sepia, but the closing credits are in black and white. But to make it colourful, they've made the terribly awful superimposed credits yellow, but the footage is still black and white. It's weird, isn't it?
I love that they did that trick quite a lot, didn't they? They'd make the writing yellow or something to give it an injection.
Crossroads famously had yellow writing.
It's just a little injection, isn't it, of colour to it. Unnecessary, I think.
Totally unnecessary. So obviously carry on watching Public Eye for the rest of my life, probably. But and I also saw a documentary about the royal family, which I couldn't watch all of, but it was interesting seeing Prince Charles, who I've met, the heir to the throne, just talking very naturally and talking about what he cared about and seeing him meeting people. It's quite a skill, isn't it? He does this thing when he meets people, he waves his hands around a lot and gesticulates to things. And I can't help thinking that he's thinking, if someone's filming this from a long way off and can't hear what I'm saying, I look really engaged because I'm pointing. And you sort of closer up, you see these people looking at him and they're kind of thinking, why are you waving your hand around? What are you pointing to? It's like that weird thing that politicians do, and a certain American president of note, who we shan't mention on this podcast, but is current, when he approaches a crowd, he does that thing, and George Bush used to do this as well. You point into the crowd, and you're not actually pointing at anyone, but you point into the crowd like you're pointing to a specific person, and you wave and give them a thumbs up. So it makes you look like you've got a personal touch, and that there are people, it's not just a crowd of people, it's people watching you who you specifically know and love. And it makes you... Yeah. When I learnt about this trick years ago, I tried it at a Doctor Who convention and just had so much fun walking at a convention where I hardly knew anyone in the audience. Just walking down, and I turned around and I kept pointing to people and waving. And these people kept sort of looking between each other and looking back at me and saying, who are you pointing to? I don't know.
I've never met you in my life.
Like this sea of confusion of people wondering who I was pointing at. I think, who's he pointing at? I don't know. Anyway, and I just love to think that at some of those recent American presidential rallies, that's exactly what's happening. The people are going, what? I've never met him. Anyway, all that nonsense aside, the thing that I've watched 2 episodes of is a thing called The First. Have you heard about that?
No, not heard of that. No.
It's about a mission to Mars. It's a current thing being shown on Channel 4.
I expect I'll watch that in about 50 years then, the way I watch things. Time it takes me to get to new things.
And it stars a very famous actor whose name I've now forgotten, who I think was very famous for having a relationship with Madonna, was it? Oh, I can't remember. What's his name? Oh. Isn't it awful? He was known as a bit of a wild boy back in the day. I want to say Sean someone. That's not right, is it?
I don't know.
I'm going to have to look up The First, aren't I?
The First. Yes.
Sean. Oh, you're going to do it.
Shawn Mendes?
No, The First. Who's the star of The First?
Let's have a look.
It's just old man with failing memory.
Sean Penn.
Sean Penn. See, I was right. It is a Sean. Stars Sean Penn.
A pen given to him by Michael Parkinson. That's right. Reference to last week's show.
A complimentary pen. I've got a lorry hold of them outside in the driveway. And he's very, very good in it. I would say that in common, and I am sounding like an old moaner, in common with a lot of modern dramas now, it's too slow. It's so microscopic in its detail of people's personal lives. I just think, get on with the story. That said, it's got loads of blooming good stuff in it. And you think you can see where it's going, and it slightly changes track. There's something very dramatic and terrible that happens, I don't know, halfway, third of the way into the first episode, which I absolutely knew was coming because of the way they were building up to it. Just the grammar of the way they were telling the story. I think, you wouldn't be showing me all this if the following was about to happen. Anyway, I do still recommend it. So The First, have a look at that.
There we go, The First. I shall certainly take a look at that. And that's on Channel 4 or 5?
Channel 4.
Channel 4.
Not 4 or 5, just 4. Stop, don't add multiple options.
Well, I was asking you. It was sort of, is it on?
It's on Channel 4.
It's on the one in between,
isn't it? 6
isn't it?
or 7.
Channel 4.5.
I often tune into that one. It's weird. You kind of get a weather forecast at the same time as sports. Anyway,
he's kicked the ball into the thunderstorm.
Talking.
Michael Fish is on the pitch,
flapping around. Talking of The First, could you read out the first email?
I certainly can.
I was desperately trying to do. Don't worry, folks. I'm going to try to talk to Jamie Anderson later as well.
Marvellous. Well, if you want to send in emails, you can send them to podcast@nicholasbriggs.com. We love an email. We met a few of you at the Big Finish Day convention this weekend, people who have emailed in. So, yeah, it's always worth a good old email. So this first one here, subject is Orson Welles' More Than Meets the Eye. That was sent on the 7th of the 11th, 2018 at 12 minutes past midnight. A night owl over here, and it's from Nick Ferraza. Dear Nicholas and Benjless, as a massive Transformers fan, that's massive as in I enjoy it quite a lot, not massive as in I'm substantially larger than the average human being. You could be big like Optimus Prime. I thought that I should write in and clear up the confusion that arose last week about Orson Welles' final role being the villain in the Transformers movie. Whilst it is true that, as Nick suggested, he was long dead by the time the 2007 live-action film rolled around, this is not the film that he appeared in. He played the role of the villainous Unicron, that's Unicron, not Unicorn, in the original 1986 animated Transformers film, and this was indeed his final ever film role, as he passed away before the film was released. Attached below is a link to a clip of the film, just in case you wanted to hear possibly the greatest actor of all time voicing a giant evil planet in what is basically a glorified 90-minute toy commercial. It's all very stupid, but in the best possible way. You're welcome for this nugget of largely useless information. Do with it as you will. All the best, Nick Ferraza, sent from inside the house.
Oh,
great email.
Thank you, Nick. That's really good. I'll watch that later. Yeah, I think you summed up Orson Welles' appearance in such a production perfectly there. Right, next email, obscure questions and answers, sent on the 5th of November at 20 past 7 in the evening. That's all right.
Leisurely time, yeah, that's nice and leisurely.
Just after he's had his fish fingers and frozen peas, probably.
Oh, love it. Love a good frozen pea.
Just the one.
Just the one.
Do you ever eat frozen peas when they're frozen?
No, I'm not weird.
Oh, I've had one or two.
Why did you do that? I'm curious.
Well, yeah. I mean, it can't hurt you. No, I'm fine.
They're best for just throwing at people, aren't they? That's what you have to do. When somebody's across the room not paying attention, you get out a frozen pea and whack. There we go.
Well, a nice treat you can do that an old friend of mine who, funnily enough, I just bumped into at Waterloo Station today, Lizzie Hopley. You can just take grapes and put them in the freezer, and then you get a nice...
I've heard this.
Yeah,
I've heard this
really
is a
nice.
good thing.
They're nice. Frozen grapes are really nice to eat because they start thawing the moment you start eating them. Anyway, this is from Chris Avery.
Frozen lemon. Just saying.
Just frozen egg. Just random things. Shout frozen random things. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting cow.
interrupting.
No!
Love it.
You're doing
classic.
interrupting Frozen Lemon. Dear Benji and Nick, the podcast continues to be as brilliant as ever. That presupposes it was brilliant before, despite the unexpected Halloween profanity. Would you like to explain that for anyone who didn't hear it,
I
Benji?
certainly would, yeah. Well, me and Nick, we were doing Ghost Watch last week, if you've not heard it, and we were sitting, and it sort of went down the route of telling spooky stories, because that's what you do when you talk ghosts. Anyway, we were getting really into it and having a chat, and then all of a sudden, Nick's laptop crashed onto the floor and made an almighty bang, and I was quite disappointed listening back to the recording because it didn't sound as loud as it was in the room, because it was really loud, wasn't it?
It made it. We jumped virtually out of our skins,
and I just uncontrollably swore, and I have to admit,
so we said one big swear word, and then I indicated to you not to do it again, and then you just carried on.
I was just like, it just blew my mind. I was just totally, when you're just out of control. But we decided to leave it in because it sort of it sums up how an accurate portrayal of how frightened in that moment we were. And then after about 2 seconds, Nick, being the professional that he is, just cracked back into talking about it, and the whole situation was diffused immediately. But it was quite freaky, wasn't it?
We didn't decide to leave it in. We had to leave it in because I had literally no time to edit it because we were going to Big Finish Day the next day.
Oh well, there we go then.
But I don't attribute any sensible editorial policy to my thinking. Right. Where did we get to? Oh, yes. I particularly enjoyed the Sky episode, says Chris Avery. When I was at school, 2 of the girls in my year decided to call me Sky due to my mop of very blonde hair and questionable interface with the real world.
That's a fun
probably
fact.
The real reason they called you that. What did you say, mate? Sorry.
I said that's a fun fact. That is. Yeah, very niche cult telly nickname. I like it a lot.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't have been at the time, you see. Sky was extremely popular. It was on Children's Hour, and we would have all watched it. I have a question and an answer for you. Firstly, when you speak to Jamie Anderson, can you ask him about Candy and Andy? Can you remember this for when I phone him? This was a surreal photo story in a children's comic from the late 1960s about 2 children stroke dolls being raised by 2 pandas, Mr. and Mrs. Beranda. I happened to Google it the other day, and I'd never realised it was created by Jerry Anderson, although looking at it now, it's fairly obvious. Secondly, regarding the 3 difficult questions about cult TV sent in by another listener and Nick's confusion over the Transformers question, Orson Welles' final role was Unicron in Transformers, the movie released in 1986, alongside Leonard Nimoy as Galvatron.
Awesome.
It was a feature-length animated film spin-off of the TV show. Thanks for entertaining us. Chris Avery sent for my iPad. Everyone's really quite keen on informing us of that, aren't they?
They certainly are. There's a lot of Transformers love out there, isn't it?
Yep, and I hope it stays out there.
Oh, I like Transformers growing up. I used to have some great
Transformers, robots in disguise.
I used to have some great books, like annuals or whatever they were of Transformers. I used to
whatever.
Old
different
news.
Generation.
So we got another one here. It says controversy or controversy, depending on where you're from, and Orson Welles' last role, brackets, apart from the very last one and the Netflix film. 5th of 11th 2018. That was at 1:34. This indicates it could be 01 as in the morning, so who knows. Could of course be. I'm just talking now. Anyway, hi chaps. Apologies
this
for the late.
Kieran McLaughlin, by the way.
I was going to say that at the end, but yes, no.
Oh, sorry. I usually mention.
So do I. I don't know. I've just gone crazy, Nick. I've just lost my mind.
A crazy man.
That's the ghost taking me. Hi chaps, apologies for the lateness of this email, but I've just listened to the Ghostwatch episode and felt I needed to correct something you mentioned. Thomas Hodden is right. Orson Welles voiced the planet-eating robot Unicron in Transformers the movie, which was released in 1986, a year after his death. The film also includes vocal talents of Eric Idle, that's pretty cool, Leonard Nimoy, Judd Nelson, The Breakfast Club saying Elmo's Fire, and Peter Cullen.
Who's he?
who voices the same character of Optimus Prime in most of the animated series and all the Transformer live action films. Car from Knight Rider, Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. I'm so depressed. The main villain Vengar in the animated series of Dungeons and Dragons. Love Dungeons and Dragons. I was never keen on that thing, that animated series, and I don't know why. He also voiced the Predator in the first film.
Really? So all that...
He just had a bad throat that week. Anyway, I saw Ghostwatch when it was originally on. I was 13 at the time, and even though I didn't know it was actually a drama, I thought it was a pile of poo.
It was a television program. How could you mistake that for a pile of poo?
Although I did find Parky reciting nursery rhymes at the end quite laughable. Unfortunately, it paved the way for dreadful reality-based TV shows like Most Haunted and celebrity psychics like Derek Acora. What was that thing that he said that famously on there? Was it Judy likes Dick? Judy loves Dick. And of course, it was hilarious. But he was talking about a man called Dick.
Obviously,
yeah,
yes.
And it was terribly ridiculed him for that forever. Derek Acora, who would make an hour-long program about an empty crisp packet if you told him it was haunted and paid him enough money.
Wow, what a thing to say.
It's very he's not had it easy in terms of the press trying to expose him. Mediums is a tough one. Most Haunted I used to like. I liked a bit of Most Haunted, but only if I could suspend my imagination and sort of. Really.
The phrase is suspend your disbelief. You don't want to suspend your imagination, mate.
Yeah, but I can't talk. I just can't talk it. Terrible.
I'm here to help you.
Terrible. Thank you that this is my official language advisor. But
smart ass.
But no, Most Haunted is good. The soundtrack is probably my favourite thing about Most Haunted. Anyway, carrying on here.
How did it go, by the way?
There's one great track in it. It was like, but the theme tune was like, I've got an album of it somewhere actually, which was given to me by a friend years ago.
By someone from the other side. Wasn't there an ex-Blue Peter presenter who used to present it with him?
I can't remember. The main person who did it was Yvette Fielding.
Yeah, she's ex-Blue Peter.
Was she ex-Blue Peter? I didn't know that. Yeah. I just think of her as the ghost lady walking around in that leather coat.
I think of her as the ex-Blue Peter lady who later did a really ridiculous supernatural show.
But she just turns up and says, "Now, have you seen ghosts?" And the bloke's there going, "Well, the floorboards on the third floor are really quite creaky at night." And they're going, "I think that's evidence alone that the Grey Lady is indeed wearing Dr. Martin boots." But it might as well be that. Although I think the most scary one was done round the corner from where I live. Interestingly enough, there we go. So carrying on with this message, anyway, it's not the Most Haunted podcast. Sorry, everybody. Good name for one, though. I hope you've recovered from your trip to Derby, brackets Big Finish Day, and that they treated you well in my old stomping ground. If Nick remembers where he sent the competition prize of a copy of his signed 11th Doctor Book 2, for which I thank you, and is a little confused, I think I should explain. I used to go shopping a lot in Derby because I grew up in Ashby de la Zouche.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
I love saying that. I've got some friends who live there.
Oh, you know it?
I do know it. Yeah, because I always think it sounds really rather extravagant. Which is just in the next county. That little slight in wild pastures in the 10th Doctor chronicles about Sylvia Noble having to downsize and move to Ashby did not go unnoticed and would be better subject for the Big Finish podcast. Only joking. I also went to secondary school in Burton-on-Trent, which I think Nick is maybe familiar with.
Yes.
And now I live in Northern Ireland.
Yes, I lived in Burton-on-Trent for a year when I was a kid. 1972.
Good year.
Yeah. So I saw from episode 1 of The Curse of Peladon. That's the day we arrived.
I love the way he does this. He dates his life by the Doctor Who that was on at the time.
I missed the first 5 minutes of The Curse of Peladon.
Oh, that's a good. Lots of climbing up mountains and stuff.
Oh, I know.
Great story. Great story. I hope this email finds you both in good spirits. And keep up the classic/cult TV viewing. Warmest regards, Kieran McLaughlin. Thanks for that, Kieran. Awesome email.
Right.
Now we have it on our page here. It is time to phone the man.
Connecting.
Hello.
Hello.
Haha.
Why are you wearing a scarf indoors?
Because I'm in a shed and it's cold.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Or rather, it's not cold because I'm wearing a scarf.
Amazing.
How are you, Jamie?
Good. I'm really happy to discuss the logic of wearing a scarf with you.
I notice you're not wearing a scarf.
No, but I am wearing a hooded garment because in my office it gets cold because it's in Wales.
Yeah.
So my ears get cold.
Oh.
Yeah.
If
I
it's
mean,
in
this is already the most fascinating chat I've ever had with you.
if it's in Wales, surely it's your years.
My what?
Your years.
Oh, my ears.
My
Yeah.
years. That's how they
Yeah.
say ears in Welsh, isn't it? Years. It's
Did you learn that from Tim Treloar?
yeah, yes. Although he
Yes.
probably would have called me a daft racist for saying that.
That's why I didn't want to join in with your anti-Welsh banter.
That wasn't anti. I'm just pointing out a phonetic quirk.
So Chris Avery messaged in to say about Candy and Andy. Are you familiar with this? He
What does
is.
he want to know about Candy and Andy?
Well, he didn't know it was a Jerry Anderson thing. What do you know about it?
Jerry Anderson's Candy and Andy. Yeah, well, off the back of the sunburn, I guess the whole team at Century 21 thought, we really know what we're doing now. So what would the kiddies like? And they thought what the kiddies would like is a pair of shop mannequin children who live above a toy shop with a pair of bipedal bears. No, they're pandas called Mr. and Mrs. Bearander. They drive around in Stripey the Magic Mini, and they thought they would like this creepy nightmare fuel to become part of a comic which ran for like 200 issues or something and scarred the children of the mid-1960s forever.
Wow. See,
It's the most terrifying thing I've ever seen.
Wow, I never saw it, and I was around during that time.
Well, that's why you're as sane as you are.
Do you still own the rights to it?
Yes.
Well, expect a Mr. and Mrs. Bearander.
Spin-off.
Bearander Chronicles.
Let's
I mean,
do
who knows?
it.
I've got some great pictures. Always the mannequins look like they are staring at you, preparing to murder you. And there's a horrible shot of Andy and Andy looking over, two shots, one of them looking over the edge of a riverbank, and the other one, which is supposed to be taken from underwater, looking up at their faces like they just drowned you. It's horrible.
Wow. Well, I'm
You
very...
can't have all successes in your career, it turns out.
Yeah, but it makes good podcast content.
Perhaps we could reenact episodes of the comic as short skits. I mean, it would be terrifying, so probably not. But it would have been good for Halloween.
Can you send me one of the images of it? Have you got any on a PDF
Oh, yeah,
or
I will
anything?
send you the images shortly.
Thank
and
you.
You will be scarred.
Just hear me screaming.
There are a few on Google, and they are horrific.
Yeah, well, I've got even worse ones than the ones on there. I mean,
Well, this has turned into possibly the most interesting things you've ever said on the podcast.
right. Well, I'm glad to have peaked now.
Good. Have you anything to add?
Not really. I'm just working really hard on Firestormy
Yeah.
things right now, which is very exciting. And yeah, there's not any time for anything else.
No, well, except
It's
that...
good, but
Go on.
yeah. Well, no. I just would like to find some time to have a beer with you and Benji.
That'd be
Ooh,
good.
that'd be lovely.
We got to do that before Christmas, haven't we, really?
Yeah, should we have
definitely.
a pre-Christmas party, which is just the three of us?
Yeah.
Best party ever.
Brilliant. Nobody else will want to come anyway.
No, we won't record it either. That would just be something between ourselves.
Yeah, unrecordable, unbroadcastable,
Totally.
unrepeatable.
I'll speak to you later, though, and waste some of your
Probably.
time. But mutually waste our time because I haven't had a proper chat with you for at least 3 days.
Yeah, so much to catch up on.
All right then, cheerio, mate.
Right, have a nice podcast. Thanks for having me again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
There you go. Now, Benji.
Yes, Nick?
It's time to move on to the main topic, which I've got written down here as Sky, but because I forgot to.
We'll talk about that again.
But I have to go and collect my son from school, so let's stop recording and reconvene.
Certainly. Yep, not a problem at all.
Is that all right, mate?
Certainly, my old cobber. Just
Okay,
give us, I'll be here, just give us a bell and we'll conclude. Right, so we're talking survivors, aren't we?
Yes, I've returned from picking my son up from school, so caught in the rain walking home. Survivors,
what a juggernaut of a thing to pick.
Yeah, it just happened to be on the shelf after we'd frightened the wits out of ourselves last week.
Well, it's one of those ones that I've wanted to do for quite a while, so it's quite nice to finally get round to it, really. There's
so
an
it was the
awful
first
lot
one.
of it.
It's called
The Fourth Horseman.
Yeah.
If you don't know what Survivors is, it is a television series about a disease which has been is called the Death. That's what they call it in the end, and it takes hold of 1970s England and wipes out pretty much all of the population, leaving only a few people scattered around to pick up the pieces. So,
the whole world.
Yeah, well, the whole world.
As far as we know, but of course, yes, just mainly southern England because it's BBC in the 1970s.
But it's an incredibly powerful piece written by Terry Nation. It's every episode kind of touches on issues, touches on different sort of topics and things. It often makes you think and puts life into perspective. But a great series, which obviously has had a second. This is just going to make me laugh now. A second lease of life with Big Finish. The Death.
The Death has had a second lease of life.
But it's a cracker. So we sat down and watched the first episode. There were 3 series, weren't there, of this. Initial thoughts, Nick, watching it back again?
Well, I have mixed feelings about Survivors because I love the concept and I love what we've done at Big Finish, and I think I loved most or a large part of the first series on the television. But worth remembering that when it started on television, I was slightly too young for it. Doctor Who was perfect for me at that age, and this wasn't, of course, fantastical enough, and nor did I expect it to be fantastical, but it was sort of like end of the world scenario, and I was sort of fascinated by it, and did watch quite a lot of it, going right up to the end of it, the 3rd series, I think. But I found the everyday struggle aspect of it quite a struggle. It was quite a lot of episodes latterly are just about characters, and the lesson that you're going to learn from the story is fairly obvious from the first scene, I feel. But this first episode is a remarkable watch, really. I mean, it's done in exactly the same way as all TV drama in those days from the BBC. Shot in a studio, multi-camera, no incidental music, not much sound design to talk of, not really any interesting camera work, except perhaps on location when they do a very high shot where the camera comes the crane shot comes down low through the trees as Abby is walking around the deserted. Anyway, it's the story of the death unfolding, and I think that there's something beautifully parochial and old-fashioned about it, where they kind of think that everything's going to be all right. I think it's someone I know made a comparison between this and the revamping of Survivors that happened only a few years ago, where the interesting thing that Abby Grant, played by the brilliant Carolyn Seymour, is essentially a very unlikable character, and it's the disaster of the end of civilization that makes her sort of come to her senses and be a less self-indulgent upper middle class twerp, really. Whereas in the new series, the character of Abby
all right,
Grant,
Governor, no work today, mate. No petrol.
Just conflating the two words of character and Abby. The cabbie. We'll just call her the cabbie from now on. was already a very well-deserving character, you know.
Absolutely.
Very empathetic and so on. And this is... and so it's just it's also fascinating how they tell the story of the collapse of civilization on a very low BBC budget, you know, and no, they can't even, you know, show sort of CG shots of things going wrong, you know. They do it, they suggest it very well, and it's all about trains being late and men in British Rail uniforms going, oh, I don't know what's going on, and you know what I mean. And then it suddenly becomes like desperate, like the local doctor saying his wife died the night before, and
it's
and
that wonderful
sort of running around to find a doctor to have an injection of a flu jab that won't do any good. It's, you know what I mean. And Peter Bowles, for goodness sake, who remembered that? I'd completely forgotten that Peter Bowles was the husband of Abby. You know, you couldn't have done a series of Survivors with Peter Bowles in again. Well, do you think there's any caviar left?
Well, I mean, the thing, going back as well, you know, talking about the scale of it, in a way, it's and one of the things I like about Survivors is it's very sort of it's a quite a small scale. Everything about it, you feel kind of like you're with them, especially as the story unfolds. And in this, it's almost that sort of thing of like hearing the news as it comes. You know, it's not like now where you turn on the telly, although there'd be no power, but you'd find some way, you know, it'd be some disaster strikes in London as this gets worse. But this is just like, oh, I heard this had happened, and why isn't that? And it's that makes it quite interesting for me. I mean, obviously, Abby Grant, I think Abby and her husband in this, I don't think they're particularly a good pairing. I wouldn't have put money on that lasting.
Very good point. It seems to me that it's a very cold marriage, and they don't share many fears and thoughts. There are lots of shots of them, especially him looking at her, and you can see he's thinking something, then he thinks, well, best not to say. I mean, I think that the personalities of these characters owe a lot to sort of Second World War movies. They're very stoic, and they don't state what they're feeling. Everyone keeps their feelings themselves, and you can see they're all fearing the worst, but none of them dares say it until it happens, and then there's no one to talk to because everyone's gone. I mean, there's that beautiful moment where she comes out of a church and looks up and says, please God, don't let me be the only one.
Yeah, it hits you, doesn't it? It really does.
It really does, yeah.
I think as well with this, it's a first in many ways for strong female characters. I think we once touched on this in a Big Finish podcast when we're talking about it, because you've got characters like Abby and Jenny who are really, they're the main characters in this. They are you know, without question, and they're both not sort of screaming and you know, cowering as the 70s might portray, you know, the secondary female characters of that sort of.
Yeah, Jenny's quite childlike and emotionally open, isn't she? When she just says, "I'm just so lonely. I just want to be with other people." But it's a lovely performance.
It really is. There's something very charming about Jenny, and Jenny's you know, in a way the characters do grow throughout. Jenny has to confront a lot of things. I mean, later on in Survivors, you know, she falls in love with Greg, and that becomes, she goes from being the childlike sort of character, and it's almost, she has to be a mother, and she has to look after some children, and with Abby, you know, it's that long struggle, that long search for her son, but also she has to gain strength and has to really, she becomes an incredibly, you know, a leader, really. She is in charge for a lot, until obviously she sadly departs at the end of the first series. But
I mean, this was very much Carolyn Seymour's starring role, wasn't it? It was her series,
and she does an incredible job with it. I mean, she really does. Almost not shown to its full potential in this first episode, actually, because the character that she ends up becoming is vastly different to what you see in this. I always think that there's a really that symbolic moment where the character changes is when she cuts her hair.
Just what I was going to say.
And it's so brilliantly done, isn't it? And that's like, you know, the time now for being the housewife playing tennis, and, you know, that's over. Now it's about, I've got to go out and survive, and it It's really good. Yeah, it's
she burns her house, doesn't she? She burns her house down.
She does. Yeah, is that right at the end? Isn't it when you see her looking at the flames? Oh, it's just excellent. It really is.
It's incredible. It's a nice piece of work by Terry Nation, and also there's a lot of very good acting in it, in the sense that Terry Nation does drop sort of info bombs about sort of what would it be like if you didn't have the ability to build so. You know, they are spouting a lot of his theories about why this series would be an interesting thing to do, and they do it well. You know, a lesser actor would make it a bit more obvious, but I mean, Terry Nation is exploring ideas that were not prevalent there about, you know, conservation and about self-sufficiency. Those things were just sort of fringe, weird things in those days. They're mainstream thinking now, but they weren't back in those days. We do consider the demise of our way of life quite a lot now, don't we?
Well, quite, yeah. I mean, quite. I mean, there was a programme on the BBC a couple of months ago where they were talking about how prepared are we for an epidemic, and they said it's a constant struggle to keep up with things, and that there are warehouses all over the country filled with, you know, vaccinations, so that in the event of a widespread epidemic they can distribute these as quickly as possible. But of course they were saying that the struggle is that because it's ever changing, you know, this stuff, it goes out of date so quickly. But it's, you know, it's a fairly efficient system now. So taking that back to the 1970s, I mean, it would have been absolute chaos. And it's got that you know. Carry on, sorry.
No, I was going to say, indeed, as it's portrayed here, I mean, it goes, you know, the death goes through the population like a knife through butter. Nothing stops it, and people and the only way you survive is if you somehow have some extraordinary immunity to it, the way you're ill, but you do recover. But almost everyone just drops dead from it.
Which, of course, going back to days like, you know, Spanish flu and the Black Death and stuff, that was very much the case. I mean, it just wiped whole population out, especially the Black Death. I mean, that was the biggest shock, and of, you know, that forced social change really throughout the world, because there weren't jobs, there weren't enough people in charge because they were all dead, so it changed everything. But interesting fact I read, which you might find interesting, is that I was looking, because recently, and this goes, you know, a couple of months ago, the revived Survivors cropped up on Netflix, and I thought, I've not watched this since it was on the original run, and I remember at the time being unsure about it because I was comparing it to original Survivors, and so I'd watched the new Survivors back, and I actually liked it. I thought it was actually quite good. I thought there were a lot of changes. The character, ironically, I wasn't keen on in that. The most was Abby. Actually, I just couldn't warm to her in that, and I don't know why. I found myself warming to all the other characters, but not so much
Max
her.
Beasley
as Tom, who's not a trampy Welshman, but a criminal.
A criminal. Yeah, I think his was the best character in the revamp.
Oh, he was brilliant. And
I found him fascinating because he's kind of a psychopath, isn't he? But he's trying not to be. He's trying to be good and sort of failing.
And he knows that it's almost that thing, is it's like a short, you know, you can cut corners by being nasty and committing crimes and killing people. And he's trying to cut corners, but also he's trying to say, look, I'm a bit out of my depth. I've come this far. I can't really change. And of course, he was in love with Jenny. Was it Jenny in that? I can't remember if the character was
played by
Ruth.
Zoe Tapper.
Was it
Ruth.
Zoe Tapper's character? Was that
Yes.
Ruth or Jenny? I can't remember.
It wouldn't have been Jenny.
It must have been Ruth. Yes, because it was
know.
Ruth, because she was a nurse, wasn't she? In that,
No, she was a doctor.
A doctor. Yeah. Well, she was wearing scrubs. That's what my memory is. She was wearing the blue scrubs.
Yes.
Yeah, and she did a fantastic job in that. I mean, I love those two characters. Their dynamic was just superb.
Well, of course, we've had Zoe in our series of Survivors on Big Finish.
We certainly have, yeah. And also, I can't remember her name, the woman who plays Abby in it as well.
Yes, that's true. They've had her in it playing a different character. Yes.
So there are those parallels. But going back to what I was saying, the interesting fact I found is that series 2 of Survivors was delayed because of the swine flu epidemic. And I thought, what a weird coincidence. That must have been frightening for them, thinking, blimey.
I remember speaking when that new series came on, and it didn't do terribly well. And I remember Liz Sladen, funnily enough, saying to me, she said she watched it. She said, I thought it was very good. She said, the trouble is, she said, I don't think any of us is in the mood for this. We don't want to see a drama about the end of the world. You know what I mean? It's just we want something a bit brighter. And I thought that's a good point, actually.
Because this was at a time as well, wasn't it? We were really knee deep in the recession. I seem to believe it. Things were pretty grim, weren't they?
The revamp.
Yeah, the revamp.
Yeah.
I think so. Anyway, when was it? 2008. So, it was pretty turbulent time, I think.
Yes, I think that's why Liz said that, actually.
But
back to the original.
Yes.
Any other comments about it? I mean, I got hooked and watched 2.5 episodes.
I've seen them all so many times. I love it. I love that first series especially. And half of the second series. I
could already see, though, by about halfway through episode 3, those domestic aspects of it, which remind me of how bored I was as a teenager. You know what I mean? I
think it's hit and miss. I mean, it is a lot of people hanging around in sort of echoey houses and cold kitchens, isn't it, really? I mean, there are some great ones. Like there was an episode, what was it, Law and Order, I think is one of the best pieces of telly I've ever seen. Just so powerful.
What happens in that episode?
That was the one where it was all about execution and about how do you punish somebody in a world where there is no law and order. So a murder takes place, and it's all about nobody will confess to who actually killed this person. And I don't want to spoil it for the listeners, but I'll just say that it's a lot of them saying, well, this is the person that committed the murder. What do we do? Because we can't take them to court. We can't put them into prison. We can banish them, but they might hurt somebody else. But if we kill them and execute them, does that make us just as bad as them? And it's a really it's just so compelling, because you're sitting there and you're thinking, and everybody has different opinions in it. And then the real murderer is also guilty for he doesn't want to say anything because for fear that he might be on the end of this. And so it's incredibly powerful, and there's so many good episodes like that.
I don't remember that episode. I remember one where they went back into London, didn't they?
The Lights of London, yes. That's the opener of series 2. Right. That's one of my favourites, that is. So I think they set up base at the Oval or something like that. That's a cracker, that one is. It's all underground and very well done. And
you can see this, Terry Nation has drawn upon the Day of the Triffids for that sort of apocalyptic feel, hasn't he? There are a lot of similarities, and interestingly, he also did that in the Dalek Invasion of Earth. There are a lot of similarities between the Dalek Invasion of Earth and the Day of the Triffids, and he's sort of feeding off the same source material here, I feel. But he does an excellent job. I don't know how much of it he writes. Does he write most of the first series? He's certainly written the first 3 episodes.
Let me take a look.
But he is the creator.
But it's a great piece of drama, and one that I often think it gets forgotten. People, especially, I suppose, people nowadays, they refer to the new series more. But yeah, I mean, just looking here, it's really there's 3 of them that are for the series 1. Terry Nation pretty much does most of it, alongside Jack Ronda and Clive Exton, who's under a pseudonym of MK Jeeves. So it's the 3 of them for this one.
I used a pseudonym.
I don't know. It's a strange one. Must be some reason. But yeah, there are so many good episodes. There's Garland's War, Jimmy Garland, great character we brought back in Survivors. Gone to the Angels, that's an interesting one. There's a great one where they defend a petrol tanker, which I love. But yeah, as telly goes and as series goes, this first episode sets it up beautifully. You meet the characters. It's uneasy. Perhaps doesn't give you a full taste of what the series becomes.
Because this just also has Carolyn Seymour and Lucy Fleming in it. Ian McCulloch doesn't turn up until episode 2, does he?
Genesis, the second one, which is that's a great one, isn't it, as well?
Flies in his helicopter. It's called Genesis.
Yes, he's a member of the band Genesis. That's a great one.
I'm thinking of Genesis of the Daleks, but...
Well, going back to what you said earlier, great time for telly. Genesis of the Daleks, then advertising that Survivors is coming on. I mean, I wouldn't leave the house, mate. I'd be sat in front of the box. Do you know what I mean? So I'd give it, a 5 out of 5 exclamation marks for me on this one, because I love it, and it's got a huge... I'll say this. When I saw Survivors for the first time, that was like life-changing TV for me, because I love things like Day of the Triffids. I love end of the world things. I love things things that push people to their limits and blur the line between human beings as we know them now in this world, and how far can somebody really go. And so for me, seeing this was just what I wanted, a slow-paced end of the world sort of thing. Sort of thing.
Well, I really liked it. I just had that slight reservation about it getting a little bit sort of kitchen sink and less issue based. So I give it 4 exclamation marks.
I think that's
out of
very
5.
fair. I think especially by the time it gets to series 3. I mean, I must confess, I don't think I finished series 3 in the end, because I found it just it got too like that. It got very kitchen sink based and just lots of sitting round tables, really. And I just, it lost it became more agricultural, more about how to be self-sufficient and run a farm, and less about the end of the world. Testament to, I think, with Big Finish taking on, Big Finish now, I think we're up to our 8th series now, and it's still there are lots of stories to be told that are not agricultural. So I think
I haven't quite finished doing the 8th one yet, but yes, that will be the next one out. Yeah.
So I think to say that it ran out of ideas is, it's one of those things. Obviously at the time they did, but there is a lot of mileage that has been proven.
Definitely
in this.
Definitely.
So yeah, great one. That was a cracker.
Lovely. I ought to do that competition result.
You should, yes.
The prize was Torchwood Children of Earth, the DVD signed by me, because I was in it. The question was, who plays Home Office Permanent Secretary John Frobisher? Subject line was not a penguin. The closing date was Friday the 2nd of November, so we're a bit late on this. You had a bit of extra time. Anyway, so yes, here's the winning email. Subject, not a penguin. And it was Marianne Kenny wrote in to say, in Torchwood Children of Earth, John Frobisher was played by Peter Capaldi. His storyline was so heartbreaking. She's done a little emoji with a tear and a frowny face. And Marianne comes from Berlin in Massachusetts in the USA. There we are. Congratulations to you, Marianne. We will be I'll be signing that and sending that off to you. So, you know what comes now.
The choosing time.
It is the time of the choosing.
We must choose, and choose wisely.
Come on then, hit me with something, because I
got a good one.
Oh.
I've never seen it before, but it looks interesting. I think it could be right up our Strasser. Have you ever seen Into the Labyrinth?
Yes.
Is it rubbish?
Okay, no, fair enough.
I've never seen it before. It looks interesting.
All right then. I remember Into the Labyrinth very well. It's mid to late 1970s. I want to say late 77, something like that.
HTV, that's what's filled me with confidence. No, you're wrong, mate. It's 1981, final episode,
wow.
Day 82.
It started in 81.
Yes, it did.
No.
First episode, 13th of May 1981. Starring Pamela Salem and Ron Moody.
Yeah. Goodness, was it that late? They later replaced Ron Moody with someone far less impressive.
Oh, that's a bit rubbish. It did 3 series by the looks of it.
Yeah, that's why I thought it started in earlier than that. Isn't that weird? That's probably wrong. Anyway, we mustn't discuss it any further. I haven't rewatched it since them days.
Well, we're in for a thrill ride, so I suppose it's now time for us to get closer. Oh, my microphone's just gone that way. I'll have to move it.
I noticed. Yeah, you're.
I met some fun angles today. I got the angles. Yes, well, another riveting adventure in cult telly.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe, and all that malarkey, and spread the word. Benji and Nick were here. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Pressing stop now. Ka-chunk.